Move on to the subject of the abuse of children. I'll put a comment here that if we have governments that can't protect our own children, those governments are capable of doing anything anywhere in the world. So that's my personal opinion. Let's bring on Professor Diane Rasmussen McAdie. Diane, pleasure to have you back with us, and you've got an update on the Fornethy women for us.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, it's great to be here with you today. So just as a reminder for anyone who may not have been following the Fornethy case since UK Column started covering it early last year, there are a group of women who were abused in care, in residential school care, from around 1960 to 1991. There is an ongoing petition that's very active, lots going on. So just as a bit of an update, let's play the short video from STV News, which captures some highlights from the Petitions Committee meeting in March.
Why are you guys here today? You have obviously been campaigning for justice for a while, so what is it that brings you to Holyrood today?
We just want to be heard. Again and again, we've been here before, and we'll keep coming until they hear us and take some action. So the more politicians we can get on board, the stronger our case is. So that's really why we're here, to be heard and seen, and we will not go away.
So that is actually a clip from the podcast that the four of the leaders of the Fornethy group did on the day of the Petitions Committee meeting. They were obviously very angry. And as they said, they really just want to be seen and heard. The petition is for the purpose of being able to apply for the redress scheme with the Scottish Child Abuse Inquiry, which to date has spent over £72 million, mostly, I think, on legal fees to protect the Scottish government. So here we have the official report, which is available. The link will be in the show notes, covering the transcript of that meeting. And you can also see here, just out of interest, as a side note, that two of the other petitions under consideration is one on thrombosis and one on sudden cardiac death. So referring back to James's and Mark's segments, I wonder why that might be. After this, we have had a lot of media participation immediately following the Petitions Committee meeting. So in addition to this transcript, as you'll see here on the next slide, we've got a couple of just screenshots of some issues around what we keep being called Fornethy House instead of Fornethy Residential School. The issue here is that it was never called Fornethy House when the women were there in attendance. It was always called Fornethy Residential School from the time that it was from the residential school to the end. And we also see a lot of inaccuracies around reporting why the women were sent there. They were there because of, for different reasons. We have a lot of different reasons why we think it happened, but the inaccuracies reported in the media at this committee meeting was that it's for convalescent care or respite care or holiday camp. Was actually none of those at all whatsoever. There are different reasons why women were sent there. So what we've been trying to do is work to correct the messages that get sent out. And some of these media outlets have corrected their coverage immediately when we've asked them to do so. And it's so saying, please don't call it Fornethy House anymore. Please don't say it was for convalescent care. Let's just say what it was. It was a residential school where the teachers were there and the children were in charge of people by the state when they were there, which is what Scottish law calls for. So next we'll see an example of this here. If we can go to the next slide. We see here that we've had some changes from removing Fornethy House to Fornethy Residential School and saying they were from disadvantaged backgrounds, which tends to be the closest to what we seem to be able to say that it is. Definitely not convalescent, definitely not respite, and definitely not a holiday home. They were there for 6 weeks of horrific abuse.
So, Diane, if I can just come on, we just need to move on to the next slide, because this is the key issue here that the government has been trying to call Fornethy something which it is not. So just give us this one again while we've got the screen on the slide on screen.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, so this was from Glasgow Live, which was they very quickly corrected it. So we will see here, it doesn't say Fornethy House, it doesn't say Fornethy Residential School. The problem here, as we have been able to isolate, is Shona Robison and the SNP, and I would imagine Hamza Yusuf as well, because they keep saying, well, the abuse was only short term. So they were only there for 4 to 6 weeks at a time. So therefore, they don't qualify to apply for the redress scheme because, what is 6 weeks of abuse, right? And it's absolutely, absolutely despicable. So again, here we see the corrections that have been made Fornethy Residential School and girls from disadvantaged backgrounds, rather than Fornethy House, convalescent. And those are the messages that the government has been pushing, which has not been helpful at all for the case. If we can go to the next slide. So this is my article that was published on UK Column a few weeks ago, which goes into the detail that I found when I visited the archives for several months from last autumn going into the first part of this year, as well as if you look at the UK Column news from 2 weeks ago, I've got the coverage on there. What we're seeing now, because there's been a press release by the Fornethy ladies that UK Column has assisted with, we're seeing Yahoo News here as an example of an aggregator that is sort of resharing these older articles from a few weeks ago. And I just happened to see these over the weekend. There's one from February when we had a Fornethy conference where we shared some of these findings of what I found in the archives, as well as issues around human rights and the legal case that is undergoing, as well as the protests from November. That was when we were at George Square protesting outside of Glasgow City Chambers. And that's me in the yellow raincoat looking like, as my husband called it, a waterproof banana. But I did not provide that. That was from one of the ladies. So if we go on next here to the next slide. This was from the Sunday Mail from last Sunday. So it's the biggest newspaper in Scotland. We had a full page of coverage about what was going on with the case. Most of this article was directly quoted from the press release that the ladies put out. So we sent it out to multiple media sources. And this next piece here is from the Brian Whittle, who's one of the MSPs who is in support of the women, has been from the very beginning, along with some of the other MSPs. So we can see here that his officially submitted evidence in support of the petition says that the education bill and a lot of legislation before this throughout Scotland, in the acts before this, as well as when the women were sent there, is that they do act in loco parentis in place of the parent, which basically means that anything that happens to the children when they are in school is the responsibility of the state, the teachers, the staff, whoever was there. And so therefore, Brian Whittle's conclusion is that because of this, the government is potentially violating the laws from the UN Convention of the Rights of Children by excluding abuse victims because they were abused just the same as anyone in long-term care or any other sort of school situation. Just because they were in short-term care doesn't necessarily mean that they should be excluded. Actually, they shouldn't be. So we have some activity going on social media. If you want to follow our Twitter account, we are at Fornethy Ladies on Twitter/X. So we've been reposting a lot of the media and trying to target some activity towards Hamza Yusuf and Shona Robison. Brian has done an excellent job of contacting Shona Robison and the SNP and Hamza Yusuf through several tweets as well. And as you can see there, he's retweeted some of these articles. And this one post, for example, has had over 4,500 views as of when I took the screenshot. So we're getting a lot of good coverage there as well. If you want to get involved, and I hope people can, if you are in Scotland or can get to Scotland, we will have the next Petitions Committee meeting on the 17th of April at 9:30 a.m. here in Edinburgh at Holyrood. We are planning a large protest, and you can also sign this petition here to allow them to access the redress scheme, which is directly through the Scottish Parliament, Scottish Government website. And we have a change.org petition as well that you can sign. That one also has, well, we've already met our goal of 500 signatures, but we want more, obviously. And we have just started a crowdfund that will go directly to the ladies that they can use for costs of transportation and so on. So please donate if you can. Thanks.
Okay, Diane, thank you very much for that update. It's good to see that things are starting to move, and it's particularly good to see that some of the members of the Scottish Parliament getting properly involved there, including the gentleman you mentioned, who's also pointed out he thinks that a lot of the stalling is due to the fact that the government's getting worried about how much money it would have to pay out in compensation to the ladies. But more on that in due course.